guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelby and today I'm going to be doing my November reading wrap-up part 1. I'm going to talk about all the books that I read from the 1st to the 16th of November. In those 16 days, I ended up reading 20 books, which is quite a few, so let's hop right into it. The first week of November, I actually was doing a vlog where I read romance booktuber recommendations. If you guys haven't already seen it, I will link it down below so you guys can go watch it and hear my in-depth thoughts about these books. But I'm just going to quickly mention all the books that I read and my star ratings. The first one that I read is Getting Schooled by Emma Chase. I gave this 4 stars. The next book that I read is XO Zach by Kendall Ryan. I gave this 4 stars. The next book that I read is The Bombshell Effect by Carla Sorensen. I gave this 4 stars. The next book that I read is Ryan's Bed by Tijan. I gave this 3 stars. The next book that I read is Flow by Kennedy Ryan. I gave this 3 stars. And the next book that I read is Colty by Mariana Zapata, and I gave this 5 stars. And then after I did that video, I read a few romance arcs that I was needing to get to. The first one I read was Insatiable by Melanie Harlow, and this one actually already came out if you guys are interested in reading it. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And this is the 3rd book in the Cloverleaf Farms series, and it is a friends to lovers romance, which you guys know is one of my favorites. It's about a girl named Meg who she moved away from her hometown and her parents own Cloverleaf Farms, and she's been living I think in like Boston, focusing on her career, dating this guy, but out of the blue he dumps her, and so she goes back home to Cloverleaf Farms for her sister's wedding, and she goes back a little bit early just to get some family time and kind of sort out her head after that breakup. And one of her best guy friends since high school, he lives there, and his name is Noah, and he is prior military and he now is a sheriff. So you gotta love a man in uniform, and the two of them always had kind of secret feelings for each other, but they never expressed it to one another because he was shipped off to basic training. And now they're back together again in Cloverleaf Farms, and they have one steamy night together, and it kind of complicates their relationship, and they can't get enough of each other. And it's their romance, and like the title says, they are insatiable for each other. I loved the sexual chemistry between Meg and Noah. I thought there was so much steam there, and I really liked how this was coupled with the really sweet small town romance vibe. So if you like a small town romance and you like something steamy, I think you'd really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is Unspoken by Kelly Rimmer. This one I got off of NetGalley, and it comes out November 26th. And this is the 2nd book in the Startup in the City series. And this is about a married couple named Paul and Isabel, and they are about to be divorced. I think they are due to be divorced in like 5 days, but they've been married for like 4 or 5 years, and they have just some really bad differences that have tore them apart. And Paul is giving their weekend home to Isabel, so he decides the last weekend that he is technically owning it, he wants to stay there and kind of reminisce on all of his memories there. And it just so happens Isabel has the same idea. She wants to spend her last weekend of them being married at that weekend house, and they're both super stubborn, and neither of them refuse to leave. And at first they clearly cannot stand to be around each other. Then they actually kind of want to hang out together, and they rehash all of the issues of their marriage, and they realize that a lot of their issues in their marriage were just miscommunication, and they both were kind of in the wrong, and it wasn't just one-sided. What I love about this story is it's not about a romance between 2 people who just met and are trying to start the relationship. It is about 2 people who are married and who are fighting to stay together. It only takes place over the span of like 3 or 4 days, so if you like those kind of slice of life type of stories, I think you would really like this one, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next book that I read is No Whisk No Reward by Ellie Kay, and this is the 3rd book in the Donner Bakeries series, and it's also already published and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. And each book in this series is written by a different author, and so this one is a debut novel for Ellie Kay, and our hero and heroine in this story are Joel and Sophie. Sophie is a chef, and she loses her job in Seattle, and so she decides to go all the way to Boston to help her friend open a bakery. But on her way there, her car breaks down in Green Valley, and she ends up having to stay there while her car is being fixed. And she gets a job at the local bakery called Donner Bakery, and she realizes she really likes it there. And she ends up renting a room from a guy named Joel in town, and he owns one of the local mechanic shops, and everyone warns Sophie not to be around him and not to date him, but she really can't help herself. And it is their romance, and this one had so much potential for me, but it kind of fell a little bit flat. Where I think the issue was is it added some like romantic suspense elements to it. There was a biker gang and some mysteries, and I don't think it was executed that well. I think that portion could have been left out and the romance still would have been really good. But I do recognize this is Ellie Kay's first novel, so I assume that as she keeps on writing, her novels will improve, but this one just wasn't for me, and I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. And then I ended up reading a buddy read with Kendra over at Kendra Loves Books. I will link her channel down below, and the book that we decided to read together was What the Wind Knows Nose by Amy Harmon. And this one is such a unique premise. We're following a woman named Anne. She is a writer, and it is the year 2001, and her grandfather named Eowyn, I think is how you say it, he has passed away. And before he passes away, he asks her to go to Ireland, where he is from, and spread his ashes. And before he passes away, he shows her some photographs from his childhood, and it turns out that Anne looks exactly like her grandfather's mother named Anne. And so when she goes to Ireland, she goes to spread his ashes in like this little lake, and while she is doing it, she actually travels through time. And she travels through time to 1922 when Eowyn was only like 6 years old, and she gets found by people there, and they mistake her for her great-grandmother named Anne, who disappeared I think a few years earlier and orphaned her son Eowyn. And so when they bring her back to the house, she gets to meet her grandfather as a little child, and I guess the father had died, and now the father's best friend Thomas, who is a doctor, he is raising Eowyn, and everyone thinks that it is the long-lost mother Anne that just disappeared randomly, but really it is Anne from 2001. And she decides to kind of go along with it, and along the way she falls in love with Thomas. You can see how this is kind of complicated because she's lying about her identity, and she is from 2001, so she has to decide if she wants to stay in 1922 or if she wants to go back to present day. And this one for me was so hard to rate because a lot of the beginning portion of the book, actually like the first 3/4 of the book, was pretty slow. I didn't think it was very fast-paced whatsoever. If you like Irish history, I think you would really like this because it talked a lot about the Irish Revolution. But the ending for this was so perfect that I ended up giving this one 4 stars because it had me crying. I just felt all the feels, and I loved the ending so much that it made the rest of the book worth it. So if you like time travel romances, I think you would love this one, and I highly recommend it. And then just like I did a romance booktuber recommendations vlog, I also did one for thrillers. So I have 6 books to talk about. I will link the vlog down below so you guys can go check it out, but I'm briefly going to mention all of the titles as well as my ratings. The first one is The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I gave this 4 stars. The next one is The Good Neighbor by A.J. Banner. I gave this 3.5 stars. The next one is Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson. I gave this 4.5 stars. The next one is Post Mortem by Patricia Cornwell. I gave this 3 stars. The next one is Close My Eyes by Sophie Mackenzie. I gave this 3.5 stars. And the next one is Into the Darkest Corner by Elizabeth Haynes, and I gave this 4 stars. So I ended up doing a second buddy read this month. I did it with Kendra over at Kendra Loves Books and Beth over at Beth and the Books. Like always, I will link the booktubers I talk about below. And the book we chose to buddy read is The Return by Rachel Harrison, and this one we got off of Edelweiss. It was available just to download, and this one doesn't come out until March 24th of 2020. And we all kind of went into this blind, and this was such a wild ride of a book. It's about 4 best friends named Julie, Elise, May, and Molly. And 2 years ago, Julie went missing, and everyone presumed that she was dead. They had a funeral. Everyone kind of accepted that she died, except Elise. Elise was the closest to Julie, and we're only seeing through the perspective of Elise. And then out of the blue, 2 years after her disappearance, Julie shows up home, and she has no memory of the last 2 years. And so May has this great idea that she wants to get the 4 best friends together just so they can rekindle their friendship. And they go to this really nice hotel, and it's kind of strange. Each room is themed differently, and it's a little bit weird. And once the women start spending time together, it becomes very clear that the Julie that has returned is not the same Julie that disappeared. She's very strange. She's doing really weird and creepy things. And Elise starts seeing things at the hotel, and she's wondering if they're real or if they're figments of her imagination. I don't want to say much else because I think it'll spoil the story. This is a true horror book, and it doesn't have a lot plot-wise. It's more just the creepy and scare factor. So for me, the plot was really lackluster, but this one, oh my goodness, scared me half to death. Do not read this one in the dark. Very, very creepy, straight up horror. I only gave it 3 stars just because I didn't love the plot, and it was a little bit slow in that regard, and not a lot actually happened. And this one was a total mind F. You're just like, what the heck am I reading? So I do recommend it. I just can't give it more than 3 stars. And then the next book that I read is Crank by Adriana Locke, and this is the first book in the Gibson Boys series. And this is a small town romance series that I've heard nothing but amazing things about, so I finally decided to pick the first book up. And this is about a girl named Sienna, and she co-owns a fashion company with her best friend, and she moved all the way from Georgia to, I think, Illinois to start that company with her best friend. But now her best friend needs to go back home with her parents and help them with their business, so she's kind of abandoning her business with Sienna. And Sienna has to make the choice if she's going to stay in Illinois, try and do the company alone, or if she's going to go back home to Savannah, Georgia and be with her family. And she kind of one night takes out that frustration on an innocent truck in a bar parking lot. So she damages this truck pretty bad with a baseball bat, and the owner comes out, and it turns out to be a guy named Walker, and he owns the local car repair shop. And to repay the damage of the truck, she offers to work for Walker at his shop because it's really disorganized and it just needs a woman's touch. And so she offers to work for free to pay off the damage, and it'll give her some extra time to kind of decide if she wants to move back home or stay in this town. And things between Sienna and Walker get very steamy, and they kind of have this casual relationship. And of course it gets complicated, feelings get involved, and it is their romance. And this one was really good. It has a lot of heart and heat, and I think if you love small town romances, you would really enjoy this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next one that I read is The Husband Checklist by Jasmine Miller, and this one just came out a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoy Jasmine Miller's writing. I know that when I read one of her books, I'm just gonna feel really good, and they put a smile on my face. They're nothing too heavy or too serious, and this one was no exception. And this one is a brother's best friend romance, which I love that trope a lot. And this is about a girl named Julia, and she randomly gets dumped by her boyfriend out of nowhere, so she decides to move in with her older brother Owen until she kind of gets back on her feet. And it just so happens that Owen's best friend Carter recently moved in with him as well, and so Julia discovers that Carter is also her new roommate, and she's always had a crush on Carter ever since she was younger. Her brother and Carter are a couple years older than her, and she's always been kind of the annoying little sister, and so she knows that Carter doesn't see her in a romantic way. But Julia can't help but notice that Carter is looking really good these days, and she's really attracted to him. But Julia knows that she really wants to settle down, and so she makes this husband checklist of all the things she wants to do in order to lure a husband, and she ropes Carter into helping her complete it. But they decide to take an impromptu trip to Vegas, but they have one hot steamy night together, and it really complicates the relationship, and we kind of go from there, and it's their romance. And if you like a brother's best friend romance, I think you would love this one, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the last book that I read is Top Secret by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy, and if you guys know, I love the Him and Us duet by this author duo, which is a male-male romance duet, and I love that duet so much. And so when I heard they co-wrote another male-male romance, but this time a standalone, I knew I had to pick it up. And this is about a guy named Keaton, and he is in a fraternity at his college. He's had the same girlfriend for like 6 years, and for her birthday she tells him that she wants to have a threesome with another dude just to spice up their sex life and to fulfill one of her sexual fantasies. And so Keaton agrees to do it, and he signs up for this app called Kink, where you find like hookups, and he posts a picture of him and his girlfriend, but he cuts off their heads so they remain anonymous. And he meets another guy on there who also has cut off the head on his photo, but you can tell his body is super fine, and he realizes he's actually kind of attracted to this dude. And when they start talking, things get really sexual, and they start sexting, and he stops really talking about the girlfriend altogether. And there's this online relationship that forms between these two guys, and Keaton realizes that he's not only open to having sex with this dude, but that he actually wants to. And it just so happens that the guy on the other end of the phone is Luke, and that is one of his frat brothers who actually lives right next door to him. And Luke and Keaton are both running against each other for frat president, and they really don't like each other. So you can imagine when they discover who the other person is, it gets really complicated, and they are total opposites. Luke is a townie, and he's had to work really hard to be where he is, and Keaton comes from a lot of privilege, and so the two of them couldn't be more different, and it is their romance. And I thought this one was so good. The sexual tension between them could be cut with a knife, and I just loved their sexual chemistry together. I didn't love this one quite as much as the Him and Us duet. I think that Wes and Jamie will forever be my number one in that regard, but I think that Keaton and Luke were really cute together, and I loved the relationship, so I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. So those are the 20 books that I ended up reading for the first half of November. I'd love to hear if you've read any of them, and if you liked them. I will link all these books down below, and I will see you guys on my next one. Bye!